A wood stove burns a log, and most of that heat literally flies straight up your chimney, wasting somewhere between 40 and 60% of the energy in that piece of wood before it ever warms your room. The Amish have been quietly using a different design for decades, one that costs as little as $40 to $200 in materials, and can heat a house for 18 to 24 hours after the fire has already gone out. It's called a rocket mass heater, and by the end of this video you'll understand exactly how the physics works, why it burns almost no smoke, and why so many U.S. states still won't officially approve it. This design traces back to the 1980, when Larry Winierski at the Approved Show Research Center in Oregon built a rocket stove for cooking that forced hot gases through a narrow vertical chamber so completely that almost nothing was wasted. Ianto Evans took that same idea and scaled it up for home heating, adding a horizontal duct that runs the superheated gases through a massive bench of clay, sand, and straw before they ever reach open air. The Pennsylvania Dutch Amish had already been building their own version of thermal mass heating for over 200 years, using tiled Kasselofen stoves brought over from German-speaking Europe. So what you're really looking at is old-world German masonry heating fused with a modern combustion breakthrough. And that combination is what makes this device so unusually efficient. Here's the part almost nobody explains properly. The heart of this system is something builders call the J-tube, and it's the entire reason this stove burns so differently from a normal one. Wood and air get pulled up through a vertical combustion chamber. Then the duct bends 90 degrees and runs horizontally through the thermal mass before the exhaust finally exits outside. At the bottom of that bend, a secondary air intake feeds in more oxygen right when unburned gases are still hot, at temperatures above 600 degrees Celsius, and that second burst of air finishes burning everything that a normal stove would send up the chimney as smoke. Inside a strong fire, the combustion chamber itself reaches 1,000 to 1,300 degrees Celsius, yet the exhaust leaving the chimney can drop to just 50 to 100 degrees Celsius, which is so cool it barely even rises. That's also why there's almost no visible smoke. The combustion is close to complete, instead of leaving carbon monoxide, tar, methane, and unburned particles drifting out into the air the way a normal wood stove does. A standard stove only manages 40 to 50% efficiency because the inside of a thick log can't get enough oxygen to fully combust, so a huge share of its stored energy just leaves as waste heat and smoke. The rocket mass heater usually reaches 90% efficiency or higher, because almost all of that energy gets captured and pulled into the thermal mass sitting right beside it instead of escaping. Now here's the claim that sounds almost too good to be true. Burn 5 logs and heat your home for an entire day. Documented users report burns of 8 to 24 hours from a single load of just 4 to 8 small logs, using somewhere between 5 and 12 kilograms of wood a day in winter. Compare that to a conventional wood stove, which typically burns 15 to 25 kilograms a day, or even a modern EPA-certified stove, which still averages 8 to 16 kilograms daily. In one documented test inside a Tibetan farmhouse, a fire-reclined bench kept the space between 13 and 18 degrees Celsius, using only about 7 kilograms of wood a day to heat roughly 100 square meters. So the 5-log claim isn't marketing exaggeration. It's a realistic outcome for a well-built bench, though it does shift depending on log size, wood moisture, and how cold your winter actually gets. Green wood above 25% moisture burns at roughly half the efficiency of seasoned wood under 20% moisture. So a badly dried log pile can quietly wreck this entire 5-log promise. This next part explains why the heat doesn't just disappear the moment the fire dies down, and it comes down to simple material science most people never think about. Materials like cob, which is a mix of clay, sand, and straw, along with stone and firebrick, store roughly 0.8 to 1 kilojoule of energy per kilogram for every single degree Celsius they heat up. A typical 1,200 kilogram cob bench can store around 1.2 megajoules of energy for every degree of temperature gain, and a 100-degree difference between the bench's core and surface holds about 120 megajoules total. That's enough stored heat to keep a 100 square meter house above 15 degrees Celsius through roughly 12 hours of a cold night, all without another log being added. An iron stove radiates heat from a hot metal surface straight into moving air, which convects away fast, but a cob bench slowly re-releases heat from a much larger, cooler surface, and that radiant heat off the bench itself feels noticeably more comfortable than blasting warm air. This is exactly why the surface right above the fire barrel can measure 200 degrees Celsius, while the far end of the same bench 3 meters away sits closer to 30 to 50 degrees, gently warm for hours. If you've ever wondered why these heaters get called banned instead of just unusual, this next part is where that reputation actually comes from. Emissions testing shows a well-tuned rocket mass heater releasing carbon monoxide under 100 parts per million and particulates under 1 gram per hour, compared with a conventional wood stove's 2,000 to 8,000 parts per million and 15 to 40 grams per hour. Technically, true masonry heaters are exempt from the EPA's Phase 2 wood stove standards introduced in 2020, which cap emissions at 2 grams per hour for non-catalytic stoves. The problem is that most DIY cob benches were never built to Underwriters Laboratories or CSA certification standards, so local inspectors often refuse to classify a homemade rocket mass heater under that masonry exemption at all. Building codes also require 36 inches of clearance from combustible material on the unshielded side of any wood-burning appliance, and a tightly built cob bench in a small room can easily fail that inspection. Then there's insurance. A certified wood stove is a known, testable product, but if a house with an unapproved DIY heater ever catches fire, insurers can simply deny the claim because the device was never officially approved. That single insurance risk, more than any actual law, is the real reason this heater carries its banned in most states reputation, even though it's rarely illegal to build one. So how does something this efficient only cost $40 to $200, when a regular wood stove alone runs $1,000 to $3,500 retail? A typical build uses 50 to 80 fire bricks, which can be free if reclaimed or $2 to $5 each if new, one 55-gallon steel drum that's often salvaged for nothing, some stainless steel pipe for the cross duct running $20 to $40, and perlite or vermiculite insulation for another $10 to $20. Most of that cost collapses towards zero the moment you're using reclaimed brick and a scrap barrel, which is exactly the resourceful pattern Amish builders lean on constantly. The build itself typically takes one full weekend, roughly 6 to 12 hours of actual labor for 2 people, though the cob bench then needs 3 to 6 weeks to fully cure before it's ready for regular fires. This is where the Amish angle stops being a marketing hook and becomes the actual explanation for that $60 headline number. Amish communities in Lancaster and Mifflin County, Pennsylvania, have run continuous masonry heating traditions since the 18th and 19th centuries, brought over directly from German and Russian Mennonite settlements. Their tiled kashelofen stoves burn for just 30 to 60 minutes a day, and then slowly release that stored heat, which is essentially the same working principle behind a modern rocket mass heater bench. Some Amish master masons, including families in Arthur, Illinois and LaGrange County, Indiana, run informal 5-day workshops where they teach the build for free and travel to those workshops by horse and buggy. Materials get recycled, labor is donated within the community, and there's no contractor markup added anywhere in the process, which is precisely why that $60 figure keeps showing up in documented builds. Their broader avoidance of dependence on the public electrical grid and outside contractors is rooted in their own community values, And this heater fits naturally into that same self-sufficient infrastructure, alongside passive solar and animal labor. Before wrapping up, it's worth being honest about where this heater actually struggles, because the 5-log promise isn't universal in every situation. In a poorly insulated home with single glazed windows, heat loss can outpace what the bench delivers, no matter how efficiently the fire burns. During sustained deep cold, anything near or below -20 degrees Celsius for weeks at a time, the bench needs daily reloading rather than coasting on stored heat. So the 5 logs and forget it comfort shifts into a more active daily routine. Carbon monoxide safety also depends entirely on build quality, since a cracked combustion chamber in a badly built version can leak CO directly into the room, which is why a CO monitor isn't optional. It's mandatory for any of these builds. Put all of that together, and you get a heating system that converts wood into stored radiant heat at roughly double the efficiency of the stove sitting in most American living rooms right now. $40 to $200 in materials, 1 weekend of work, and 18 to 24 hours of heat from a load of wood that a conventional stove would burn through in a single evening. If a 200-year-old Amish masonry tradition combined with 1980s Oregon combustion research can outperform a modern retail wood stove this dramatically, it raises a real question about what else in your home is quietly wasting more energy than it needs to. That question is exactly what the next video on this channel answers, because it breaks down the everyday heating and insulation mistakes that are silently costing households far more in wasted fuel than most people realize. Go watch that one next, because understanding where your heat actually escapes is the piece that makes a build like this one worth doing in the first place.